Hi everyone, welcome to Draftscapes. I'm Chris Tuccio. In today's episode, we're going to talk about drawing trees, specifically ornamental deciduous shade trees. These are the basic trees you got to know how to draw for your landscape design plans. Stick around. Hi everyone. So as we know, trees are very important for landscape design. Whether you're drawing a small flowering shrub or a specimen tree for your landscape, every time you draw a tree, you should think about what it's used for and what the tree you're specifying is. In this episode, we're going to focus specifically on ornamental deciduous shade trees. So we're talking about honey locusts, zelkovas, calorie pears, your run-of-the-mill street trees. Now, these are very basic trees. They're not going to show-stop any sort of design, and you're not going to spend a lot of time drawing them, but they're very good beginner trees to get you learning how to use your drafting materials and how to draw trees effectively. We'll add some complexity as we go. So, without further ado, get your drafting table, your paper, your pen, as well as your circle template, and let's get started. Okay everyone, so when we start to draw our actual ornamental trees, we're going to obviously need to use our circle template. So I'm using a few tools here. I'm using my Technograph lead holder. I'm going to be using my True Circle Master circle template, as well as my 1.0 millimeter Copic pen. As always, I'll link in the description all of the different materials that I'm using, so if you want to pick them up, you can. I'm drafting also on 16 bond drafting paper, and I have my typical Alvin drafting board as well. So we're going to start by actually doing 5 guidelines with our circle template. So here's our circle template. We're just going to do 5 circles. I'm doing 3-inch on my board, just so it shows up nice and big on the screen overhead, but you could feel free to do, 2 inch is probably a nice size for you as well. So I'm just going to do 5 side by side really quickly, starting from the left and moving over. Now, when we do the pen, we're going to work the opposite direction just so we don't smudge. It's 4 and 5. So I have my 5 circles drawn. And now I'm going to be taking my Copic pen, and we're going to start all the way on the left with this one. And so for the first one, we're just going to draw what's called contour style. So the thing that I like to tell my students is think about a crumpled up piece of paper, and you're just sort of drawing the outer edges of that paper. So it's typical jagged type edges that run around the actual guide that you just drew. And you want to draw your guides light. I'm drawing them a little darker. I drew them a little darker for this tutorial just so they show up on screen a little better. But you want to draw them light so you don't have a lot to erase. And I'm just going to be going in and out and following along that guide with kind of like a crumpled edge. Okay, it's a nice contoured edge. Okay, just following it along. I could take my time or I can go faster. Okay, it's just little zigzags along the edge there. Okay, it's a very basic type of tree. Okay, now that it's done, I'll add a little dot in the center for the center point of the tree, and look, we have our very first ornamental tree drawn. So now I'm going to take that idea, and so this is just your basic contour tree. I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to move it one step further. I'm going to do the contour tree again, but this time I'm going to be a little more liberal with my indentations. Maybe I'll come in a little more on the lower part, and then I'm going to also add some texture to it. So once again, I'm going to start from the top. You can see that I made slightly different indentations there, a little more edge to them. And we're just going to be working our way around the canopy once again. Until you have a tree like this. Now it's not that much different. There are some similarities. There's little cutouts here that aren't in there, but for the most part it's a very similar tree. So we're going to add our dot, but this time we're going to add some stippling to the second one. So This is a stippled tree. So what do I mean by stippling? So stippling is basically holding your pen at a 90-degree angle and making little dots. Like this, like little chicken pox. But what the stipples represent is actual shade. So when you're doing this, you should think about where the shady part of a particular tree is, and that's where a variety of your stipples will actually be located. So if I have my light source coming from the top of my drawing, like so, my stipples are going to be primarily on this lower right edge. I'm going to keep on stippling, and they're going to be very heavy towards the border, and then they'll lighten up as I go towards the center. And now people may think that there's no stipples on the other side, but there are, because again, a tree is a three-dimensional object, so the light will hit the top of it, and so even at the very bottom of this edge, you'll get a little shade. So we're going to make sure we get some stipples here as well. Okay, that's fine. We're going to move our attention to the next one now. And so for the next one, we're actually going to do a slightly different type of tree. We're going to take this style and we're going to make it a little more loopy. So these were slightly jagged edges, so we're going to loop the edges a little more freely. So we don't have just tiny contours, we have nice big loops. Okay, this is a nice style, especially if you're more of a conceptual type of designer. You like a more cartoonish look, not in a bad way, but just a nice look to your drawing that's a little more hand-rendered rather than photorealistic. We'll do these sort of loops. Okay, and again, a very basic type of tree, and we'll put a little dot in the center. Okay, now this time I'm going to do it two different ways, and this is just larger loops. Larger loops. Okay, for the next one, let me move over. And we could stipple this, that's perfectly fine, but for the next one, we're actually going to break the canopy up. We're going to do a very similar technique, but we're going to break the canopy up into three sections. A large section, a medium section, and a smaller section. Okay, and these sections will actually be sort of parts of the tree that are connected by branches. So we're going to start with this one on the side, and we're going to draw our larger one. So we're still doing slightly larger loops just to practice. We're going to come all the way in now. We're going to cut across the tree, like so. See how that is? That's it's my really large section. Okay, so I'm going to do a medium section now. And then a small section. And once again, I'm going to put a dot in the center, and I'm actually going to connect these with little branches. Okay, like so. Maybe these connect over here. Maybe there's a connection over here. Okay, and so that makes a nice, interesting type of shade tree. You get a little more detail on here, which makes it nice and different. Okay, we're going to recreate this. This is a sectioned tree. We're going to create this same sectioned tree now, very last one, but we're going to add some slightly more stipples to it to get a gradient on it. So we're going to use our pen here, and we're going to do the same thing just to practice. We're going to do basically this exact same tree again. Maybe there's a little difference. It also helps to go back and actually evaluate what you've done before. Practice makes perfect here. With this one, if you notice, I actually didn't really like, if I had to evaluate it, how these two parts were fairly similar in size. I'd like them to be a little more dramatically different. When we're talking about proportion and scale, we use the rule of thirds a lot, but you should, in a hierarchy of threes, have one medium, one small, one large, and it should be very apparent which is which. There shouldn't be any sort of spatial tension there. So we're going to make sure our medium this time is much larger than our small one, and so this is how we're going to do that. There we go. Okay, so now this small one's just like a little pizza wedge at the bottom. And it bridges out. Maybe we have a couple branches there. Perfect. And now we're going to stipple. So we're going to take that same exact design. We're just going to stipple over the top of it now. And again, this time my light's coming sort of in this direction for my example. And so I'm stippling heavy on this side. And each section gets stippled separately. Okay, and then we'll stipple the edge here as well. And now we'll label this a stippled section. Okay, so we have 5 very basic ornamental trees that you can practice with and put in your landscape designs. I would say draw each one continuously, or about 10 times, just to get the hang of it, and then you'll be doing them in no time fairly easily. Okay, I'll see you at the next video.